Good morning to the Board of Directors and the CEO. I would like to start off acknowledging the traditional owners of this land in which we stand here today. This morning, on behalf of the local Aboriginal community, we are here to raise awareness about a few important factors. Today, Shontelle will be speaking about the common healthcare factors that contribute to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people's increased rate of discharge against medical advice, and one healthcare strategy to reduce this. Megan will discuss the importance of RNs advocating for the Indigenous patients, as this is an issue for our current healthcare system. Jim will shed further light on 3 strengths of Aboriginal community-controlled health services in regards to holistic health. Now, I will speak about the issues regarding holistic health care for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders required by the NSB202 Constitution and the barriers that prevent our healthcare system from meeting them. Holistic care takes into consideration that all individuals are separate entities. It embraces a person as a whole being, understanding that many factors contribute to a person's health. The National Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Organisation, or NSB202 Constitution outlines the importance of why the holistic approach is needed. The definition that is outlined in this constitution refers to not only the physical health of an individual, but also the social, emotional, and cultural well-being of the community. This approach aims to provide effective and culturally appropriate health services for all communities. Even though this NSB202 constitution is in place, there is still a huge health gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. As statistics show, the life expectancy for Indigenous people is more than 9 years less than that of non-Indigenous people. 2 barriers for appropriate holistic health include geographical location and funding. Statistics show over 45% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders live in rural communities and 13.7% live in remote communities. However, Australian healthcare systems and clinics are primarily located in main cities. This makes accessing medical help for the Indigenous people really hard. Another barrier preventing Indigenous people from receiving holistic care is economic state. Even though the government has tried to close the gap by funding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, it is still under the control of the white government. The fact is that the money is not being funded into areas that are needed for Indigenous people. In saying this, due to the barriers of geographical location and funding, the Australian healthcare system is not meeting the required needs of Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders as written in the NSB202. Australia is letting down the original owners of this land by not shifting away from the old views of the world and treating Indigenous people with respect and honour they deserve, and this needs to change.
Discharge against medical advice is when an individual self-discharges or simply decides to leave a hospital or healthcare setting before they have been cleared for discharge by the treating provider. Discharge against medical advice is significantly higher within the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population of Australia. A lack of cultural safety is one of the biggest contributors. Healthcare workers who demean the cultural identity of a patient and their family and do not recognise that their identity has a large impact on who they are and what they need significantly increase the incidence of self-discharging. An absence of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander staff, and particularly Aboriginal liaison officers and Aboriginal healthcare workers, also contributes to the Indigenous community's rate of self-discharge. These staff members reduce the effect that factors such as language and cultural barriers can have on communication. Enhancing the cultural competence training of hospital staff is one health system improvement strategy that could reduce the incidence rate of Indigenous people's discharge against medical advice. Equipping staff with a greater awareness of Indigenous cultural norms, such as connection to country, family obligations, and avoidance relationships, can help them to provide more appropriate care for Indigenous patients. Can help give staff knowledge about the various Aboriginal healthcare services such as Aboriginal liaison officers and Aboriginal health workers, so that they can help their patients utilise these services. By providing adequate cultural competence training to the staff of healthcare facilities, Indigenous patients will receive care that is culturally safe, that will help them to feel safe and cared for within the healthcare environment and reduce the incidence rate of self-discharge within the Indigenous population.
Advocating for patients is one of the most important jobs of a registered nurse. To be a good advocate means to promote and protect the health and well-being of all patients. Unfortunately for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community, this is an area where, statistically, nurses have struggled. Several factors have influenced this struggle regarding patient advocacy, the most significant being the tumultuous history of our young nation. A lot of mistrust has been built up ever since the white invasion in 1788 and the stolen generation from 1910 to 1970. When you think about the lack of respect and basic human rights Aboriginal people suffered at the hands of the white government, it isn't so surprising to find that Indigenous people aren't generally liking to seek healthcare from this same government. So what can we as RNs do to improve patient advocacy for Indigenous Australians? Well, firstly, it is up to each individual nurse to ensure that they are in constant communication with their patients. By communicating openly and establishing a rapport, trust can be built and the needs of the patient can be met. The second load of responsibility falls to the hospitals and healthcare facilities themselves. Ensuring that all their staff are culturally safe is the key to helping them understand the needs of the patients. It is the medical facility's job to ensure that their staff give up their professional development in regards to this. The final thing medical facilities need to consider is to hire more Indigenous nurses. By having people there that patients can directly relate to, the lines of communication will be open and the needs of the patients can be met.
Australian Aboriginal Community Control Health Service, or ACCHS, provide a wide range of services but mainly focus on primary care. ACCHS have three main advantages in terms of providing holistic care. The first one is political power. Because of historical reason, Indigenous people's health was defined by non-Indigenous people, and there was no input from the Indigenous community. This led to the development of harmful policies such as protectionism and segregation. However, ACCHS is one of the few organizations that are operated by Indigenous community and is fully accountable to the local Indigenous community. Therefore, as opposed to the biomedical definition of health from non-Indigenous people, ACCHS and other Indigenous organizations have the power to redefine their community's health as being socially, emotionally, physically, and spiritually well. The second one is accessibility. Few Indigenous people use mainstream general practitioner as they are perceived to be difficult to access due to proximity and culturally unfit practice. While there are 150 ACCHS spread across diverse and decentralized areas close to Indigenous community, and ACCHS also largely employ Indigenous people, which helps to create a culturally appropriate environment. The third one is flexibility. ACCHS employ community approach, which means to build a dialogue and participate in information exchange with local Indigenous community. In this process, the community then report identified or perceived health problem, and then ACCHS use the information to address the problem accordingly and appropriately. For example, transport service, housing, and legal assistance can be provided by ACCHS. The underpinning idea of this community approach is the holistic health of Indigenous people.